guys. Can you see that okay now?
Yep, we can see that. Perfect.
All right.
All righty. I'll just start, and then yeah, we'll keep cracking on. All right. So yeah, in-person meetups are coming back. Still, this was kind of followed on from last month, which was the exact date was to be announced. It was supposed to be this month. Kind of glad it's not, because obviously the snap lockdown that we're all now in. So I think, again, this is kind of going to have to be put on the back burner for a little bit until we can actually kind of get a hold of it and make sure that it's safe. Also, I think someone's just chatting in there. If you can mute yourself, that would be cool. Thank you. So PowerShell 7.2 Preview 4 has been released. So yeah, if you're interested in going and checking it out, there's some cool new features going on that. So yeah, give that a go. I want to quickly talk a little bit about Haffian. So unless most of you guys here will probably be aware of what's actually been happening around that space with the Microsoft. Sorry, I'm just making sure my daughter just doesn't come tearing in here. Just going to set up a quick barricade. So you guys will be aware of what's been happening around that space there, with obviously the security exploits that have been going around. So from the latest updates, which was from the 16th of this month, Microsoft have been releasing updated tools for investigation guidance to help IT pros with incident response, and then basically to remediate and defend against the associated attacks. Microsoft's also releasing a one-click mitigation tool now, so you can basically, for customers who don't have dedicated security or IT teams, to apply security patches. That's pretty much, I think there's a couple of other things. No, that's pretty much, oh no, that's actually some of them all this month. And they're basically, obviously, there's been multiple actors trying to take advantage of those unpatched systems. So it's really important to patch your system. So if you do have Exchange Server, or you're basically even running hybrid, make sure that you patch those. That's, yeah, cool. The next one I want to quickly talk about is the PowerShell Community Textbook. So PowerShell Community Textbook is a community-driven book that basically is trying to provide a PowerShell resource for students as well as IT professionals. And that book's basically 100% of the proceeds go to charity. So it's a really cool contribution. What we're looking for is we're looking for a couple of additional authors and technical editors, mainly around unit testing. Testing. So that's basically unit testing, integration, regression testing. There's a few other ones as well, test-driven design and things like that. I've been hitting a few of you guys up. So if you guys are interested in that, let me know. Another one, another chapter that we're really looking for authors for is constrained language mode within PowerShell as well, which is something that we're needing as a requirement, because it kind of does form the security aspects of the specific that specific resource. So the next piece of the news is InSync Technology has been acquired by Rapid Circle. So if you're not aware who Rapid Circle is, they're a company based in the Netherlands, and basically they have they've acquired InSync, obviously with the similar values, but ultimately we've pretty much, yeah, we'll be working with those guys quite closely now. So they also have offices in Melbourne. So yeah, and then obviously with InSync still being in Brisbane, will be the Brisbane office. I think that's it for me. Wayne, do you want to carry on? So it will be, I'm just going to quickly go back 2 slides. I don't know if you guys saw it. And if you went back 2 slides, you would have seen that there's a tiny little bit above it, basically saying it's a Rapid Circle company. So it'll keep the similar branding. I've already updated the PowerPoint template. Yeah, cool.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, it provides a nice little IntelliSense when you do it, like when you type repetitive commands, and that's really helpful. That's definitely really helpful. So you don't have to remember everything. It automatically builds that up as you use. It is based on AI. Yeah, yeah. I'm not sure about the Cloud Shell. It's and for this to work, you need PowerShell 7.1 and above. So it doesn't work on. I think it doesn't work on 5.1, but it didn't work for me because there were additional requirements. But yeah, I don't know whether this latest version now has support for 5.1 or not. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, what?
Yeah. Yeah, so oh, sorry, I just smacked the laptop. So Secret Store, Secret Management, Secret Store was in a release candidate prior to was in a release candidate at Ignite, and now it's GA now. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm being optimistic about it. But let's see.
The decimal point, it'll actually be true.
Yeah, I think 4.9s would be nice. It'll help the websites that we actually rely on work.
Oh, damn. How onerous was it to get that? Did you just talk to your account manager? Yeah. Yeah. Well, now I'm not happy about the 4.9s because then I get less chance of service credits. True.
See, last year they had MFA outage. Sorry, not last year. I think day before they had MFA outage, and then now again they had Teams outage again just recently right now. So they would always, hit such issues.
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
And internally, what I found is even from the shell of an idea, like the narration from um,
John
what do we
Jones.
call? Yeah, Don Jones. I mean, I could sense that there's a lot of the teams internally in Microsoft are quite disjoint. Like June Blender is now working for AWS. Like she was one of the main person for writing the help and all. They didn't retain her. Like.
I was actually just wondering, Wayne, if it's possible to just have an automated process there, so it tests all the services, and when it basically goes down, you just automatically submit it. You're like, yeah.
Someone
Wow.
stop this! Someone stop this recording. This is amazing.
So
All
Wayne,
right.
how do we claim it? Like, what would be the overall process? Just a ticket, is it? Ah, okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
Right.
All right.
Right.
Well, let's. Yep.
No, that's good. That's good information.
Yep. Cool.
Yeah.
All right. Let's jump into the next slide, which is so we did have Joshua King lined up as a Microsoft PowerShell MVP or Cloud Data Center. It's actual the actual term. Unfortunately, Josh has got other commitments with PS Summit and other things, so
Toast notification guy, isn't he?
Yep.
Yeah.
Joshua King. Yep.
From Auckland. No, from Auckland or from New.
Yeah,
from
New
other
Zealand.
Yeah,
it's
from
not.
New
It's
Zealand.
not. Yeah, it's not from Auckland.
Yeah. Okay.
So it's open up for speakers. If we don't get anyone, I can probably do a PowerShell security talk, but I prefer not to because I've got other things to do. And there's a lot of other things to do, like move house. So yeah, if you're interested, definitely just let me know. Basically be anything about infrastructure. It's also, you can also do soft talk, so not particularly, it doesn't have to be too technically focused. So we're open for another speaker. I know that Wayne is interested in doing Docker.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. I think that's exactly what I was about to say again. I mean, you should push your team. I've done enough pushing, and they agreed as well. So don't give them an option to back out. Yeah.
I was going to say, yeah.
Yeah, I can be a third person, and I can keep trying to convince them again.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. So
Yeah.
if there's opportunity there, if you want to speak, so let us know, and otherwise Wayne will just set their calendars and make sure that their times are available to present. Cool. Alrighty, so let's crack on to the next slide, which I think that's it for the news and for thing. Now we've got a distinguished guest, also known as Mitchell. So he's going to give us a bit of a talk about Visual Studio Code and setting up your environment for success. So over to you, Mitchell.
Thanks, Michael. Hi, everyone. I'm going to do a talk on VS Code. Pretty straightforward. Whether you've used it or not, you've probably been exposed to it. As we know, if you've worked with PowerShell, ISE is sort of not the thing anymore, and VS Code is so widely used. So I'm just talking about sort of my experience with it. I've found when certainly showing it to others that have not experienced, it's been quite daunting sometimes because it's quite vanilla out of the box and you can do so much customization. So I thought it might be nice to, talk about, ways to make it better and sort of how I've set up my environment for the sorts of languages and tool sets I use. So that's basically what I'm going to do. So let's jump right in. So getting it set up, basically you got to install it first. If you're going to be working with repos, which is what I'm going to be talking about, you need Git. So Git for Windows, we can just download and install that. Michael actually pointed me, I think in the last talk, to this script. I think it's written by the PowerShell team or the VS Code team or the PowerShell and VS Code team, called Install VS Code. Quite a good little PowerShell script, and I'll show you that. Which can basically download, install it, and also install all the extensions you want. So more useful the next time you go to set it up, once you've kind of settled on what extensions you want. it allows you to basically just blast them all down in one go and sort of get your environment set up. So let's just jump right into a demo. Get my VM up here. All right, so got my VM here. So the thing I found 2 days ago was install VS Code just randomly stopped working. Not sure why. It couldn't download the media, but I'll try it again today and see if it does. It worked pretty much every other time I've used it, but I'll just go through my history here. Okay, so first thing first, get Git. So Git for Windows, if you Google it, I've got the links in the notes, but we can just download Git. You can just do a silent install and install it with the default settings. So literally Git /silent, simple as that. And it will just install it up with all the defaults, which is all you really need. So once we have that set up, we can use this script, install VS Code. And I have the link for where this is in the notes. So yeah, it by default, it will install the stable compute branch. I've got the stable user branch for the moment, and it will install the PowerShell extension by default, no matter what you describe, obviously, because you're using PowerShell. These are all the extensions I'm probably going to be talking about today. So they use the fully qualified name, which you can see in VS Code when you look at it. It's basically just the extension name from the store, their extension store. Let's see if that actually works. Last time, yesterday, it can't get the install media yet, and I haven't had a chance to troubleshoot it, but we have VS Code installed anyway, so we can move on. Essentially, it does all that. And then we fire up VS Code. All right, just a second. Okay, VS Code. I'll assume that whoever's listening has not used it before, so I'll just sort of give a quick tour around the interface to start with, just so you can sort of get familiar with it. So I've got the left-hand pane down here. So we've got Explorer, which is when you've got files open, you'll see this is literally a list of directories and files for that workspace you're working on. Then we've got search. Now you can actually, when you've got a file open, just Control F and it will search that file. This search will search the whole repository. So it's much more useful when you're doing big find and replaces and whatnot. So you can search across multiple files. So I tend to use that one more than anything else. Then we've got our source control, which shows, like any commits you have or all sorts of other information. Sometimes extensions can register themselves into this pane and show you more information about your Git repo. I haven't got anything open from Git, so it's not going to show anything. Then we've got our debug menu. So when you're debugging code, PowerShell, other things, this will switch when you start a debug session. So that's pretty straightforward. Then we've got our extension store. This is also very straightforward if you've used any piece of software ever. These are the currently installed extensions. And we can just search up any. If we click on one, you can actually see the extension name is normally at the top here somewhere. Let me just close this. There. So that's the actual fully qualified name. So when you want to install it using VS Code, you basically just copy that once you've decided which ones you like. And all of these ones are other extensions, which I will talk about, but extensions can register themselves down this left-hand pane. Now, the other really important part of navigating VS Code, which most people don't start with, is Control-Shift-P, which is the command palette. This allows you to do lots of different things, but for our purposes, all the Git commands you can just quickly get to from Control-Shift-P, and it will learn, like any good sort of quick menu, will learn the commands you use the most. So when you start to type something, it will suggest, the top thing. So you can just say like Git, and it will have all your top Git commands. Obviously, this is a new build, so it has nothing on it, but yeah, well, you end up using this quite a bit. So the command palette, Control-Shift-P, it's your friend. All right. So speaking of Git, I'm going to jump back to our slides. for a moment. So yeah, this image is actually from the Getting Started guide, but you can see like activity bar, the editor group, so your files, which you can split, status bar down the bottom, your terminal panel, which I'll show once I open up Git. But let's jump to talking about Git for a moment. So if you're going to be pulling repositories and working with VS Code, there are many terms that Git uses, and it's important to sort of be familiar with the most basic ones. So when people talk about it or you're looking at something, it actually makes sense. So I'll sort of jump through the most common ones. So we've got, let me get my slide open. There we go. So we've got repository. So you can have a local or remote sort of branch, but it's the repository is obviously like if you go to GitHub and you're looking at a project, that's sort of the repository that at that level, slash the actual repository. So it contains all your branches and basically all your code, all your versions of your code and everything. So that's a repository, pretty simple. A branch is actually a pointer to a commit, so a pointer to a version of code. So as you're working along, it's like a branching timeline. As you break a new branch, it's taken that point in time, that commit, and started a new branch. And that will sort of make sense as you work with it, but it is essentially sort of a branched version of your code. Then we have commits themselves, which are sort of bundles of changes attached with a log message describing your change. So it can be one change, it can be many changes. When you commit them, it always asks you to add a useful comment along with it. So that's what a commit is. And then we have push-pull. So when you clone something down, which I'll show you, it puts it into your local branch, and the local branch is just literally on your computer. So when you push from your local to your remote, and when you pull from your remote to your local. So yeah, if you're trying to pull changes from the version in GitHub, that's a pull, and you push, you're taking your commits that you've committed and pushing them up to GitHub in our example. And then pull request. Now, pull request is, I describe it to most people like a change request. So an RFC, basically you take a whole bunch of commits and changes from a branch and you want to push it into production, let's say your main branch, to be put into your production code. And you can discuss those changes. It allows you to, it has like an approval process. So yeah, think of it like a change request, essentially, where you want to take your code and merge it, as it's called, into the main branch and basically have that approved, and you can have your change request denied. So it just works like a normal sort of RFC, essentially, and helps manage that process of getting new code into production. So, all right, let's clone our first repository. So I'll jump back to our slide, back to our demo. All right. There it is. All right, so I'm going to clone from one of my repositories, but I'm not actually signed in here. So let's just pretend I'm another user and I'm cloning in this code. So Control-Shift-P, clone. You can actually browse GitHub if you want. That's an extension, because I have an extension installed, which I'll go through later, but we're going to clone from this URL. Okay, and because I have Git installed, it knows what to do there. Now it's going to ask me where I want to save my repository locally. So I would always suggest it defaults to like your local user directory. I would always put a subdirectory in here called repos or repositories or something like that. And it will create subfolders for each repository that you clone inside of that. So when you select this, it's not going to put the code directly there. It's going to create a subfolder with the name of the repository that you're cloning. So I'm going to select that. And it's going to pull that down. Okay, and we'll say yes, we'll open that. Give this a second to update the interface. And apologies, this is a little bit of a slower VM, but we'll give it a second to activate extensions. All right, here we go. So there's our Explorer window. This is the code that we've now pulled down from GitHub, from that repository. Now you can see down in this bottom left corner here, it says master, and it's got the little source control, and that's the master branch. So it's the default branch. That's the branch I'm currently in. So I've pulled down master, well, you pull down the whole repository, and I'm currently in the master branch. Right? And then right next to that is the sync button. So this allows you to push and pull just via the UI, basically, and it will, if it syncs enough, it can show you if there's pending changes to be brought down or up. It will have like a little arrow up or down and the number of commits there. So it's good to keep an eye on that when you're working on code. If there's some number and it's down, that means you haven't got all the latest changes, and you probably should sync them down. All right, so let's do a typical workflow. So we can create, actually what I should do before I do that, clone that, and we might actually need to configure Git. So this will catch you the first time you go to push something, but we essentially just need to get Git to know who we are. That's quite simple. There's two commands here. So these are this caught me out quite a few times every time I have to Google it, but there's two commands that you need to manually run in Git. We can just do it from the terminal here, but you can run this from anywhere. Paste these in. So git config. So it needs to know who you are. So I'm just going to say I'm John Doe, and this is my email address. So when you make commits, that's who will get. That's the name and the email address that will be registered against that commit. So we need those registered before we try and push any code up. It's going to ask that. It will actually break. So it's important to put the config in the first time, and then it won't complain about it again. All right. So our typical workflow is, okay, we've got this code here. We've got some PowerShell scripts, and we want to make some changes. Now, I can't generally in a repository. I won't be able to make changes to master. It will be locked off. So we need to create a branch. So Control-Shift-P. And we'll create a branch from, choose that, give a name for the branch, and that's going to be the name of our branch. And it's going to ask us what branch do we want to base this branch on. So generally, we're probably going to pull it off master or main, as it's called now. There are some other branches here. There's a dev branch, but we'll pull it from master because we want to make changes to our production version. So you can see down the bottom left, now it's switched us to this new branch we've created. So this is all local. We haven't done anything in GitHub yet. We've actually just made a copy and it's sitting on our computer. Okay, so let's make some changes. I'll just add a comment here. What I added to do. Now you can actually see that this has highlighted that comment in a different way. I'll go back. That's one of the extensions that I use, which I'll cover off later. So we've added this to do. We'll save that. Okay, now that we've saved this change, you can see that there's a little number 1 next to our source control bar. And if we switch to that, you can see that it's now logged that we are now, our changes locally are different. And if we click on this, we can actually see the comparison. Before pre-commit, this is what it was, and this is what we're going to commit into this branch, this change. Right? So we make our change, and we want to commit that up. So Control-Shift-P again, commit. We want to commit all is normally fine because we've only got one change. Commit all. Okay, it says, would we like to stage our changes? I normally set this to always because it's rare. I don't want to stage them also. I haven't gone into that, but I normally set it to always. Okay, and now it's going to ask us for the comment on this commit. So we added all right, so that's going to be, our change will be attached to that. All right, so we've added our commit, and you can see now that number 1 is gone because we have no uncommitted changes, but these changes aren't anywhere. They're just sitting on our computer. And you see this little icon here where normally the sync icon is. We need to publish our branch back up to GitHub. Now, it's not going to let me do that, but we can push because I don't have access. So it says, you don't have an upstream branch. Would you like to publish it? Yes. And it will bounce me out to some authentication saying, okay, who are you? Now GitHub's going to want to know who I am because it's obviously the access is locked off. So I'm not going to go into that, but it will essentially push our change up to GitHub. So assuming we've pushed our changes up to GitHub and they're in that branch, we want to push them into production. This is where we need to create a pull request. So I'll show you what, since I can't actually create a pull request on this one because this is production code. In order to make a pull request, here's one I prepared earlier. Let's fire this up. This was a real bug fix I put into this code. So GitHub, different systems pull requests look a little bit different if you're talking Azure DevOps or GitLab. Each one has a slightly, actually GitLab, they call it a merge request, not a pull request, but they all look a little bit different. But GitHub is the most common. So this is a pull request I've created, literally like a change. I've updated my branch to a point and said, okay, I want to move it to production. I then can just go through this UI and create one, or I can do it through VS Code by literally going. Right. It's probably because I'm not authenticated yet. All right, that's fine. But there's an option here to create a pull request. But we'll switch back to our actual pull request and I'll kind of just show you through this. So yeah, there's conversation that can be had about each change. So we can look at all the commits. Generally, there might be many. In this case, there's just one. I added this one. There might be some CI/CD checks. In this case, some testing. And so that kind of shows up in the conversation. In that conversation pane, you can normally see if your test passed. And then we have this view here where you actually review the actual code. So files changed, this will be grouped by each file, and it's literally showing you this line was removed, this line was added, and you can add comments on this line and approve this particular change, and you can approve individual changes or say, I don't approve this. And so that starts that conversation before you're actually putting it into your primary or default branch. So that's essentially what a pull request looks like. And that's sort of what we've just went through there is pretty much the most common workflow for working in a repository. 90% of the time, you're kind of just rinse and repeating that process of updating your code, getting it into production, doing a pull request, getting it approved, you know, and on and on. Obviously, if it's something you're just working on, you don't have that pull request stuff, you're just committing straight to the branch or maybe straight to master, but the concept still applies. So jump back to the slides for a moment. So as I said, typical workflow, clone the repository, create a branch, commit and push your changes, do a pull request, rinse, repeat. Sometimes, you know, obviously not always cloning the repository, but creating a branch, commit and push, pull request, create a branch. So that will all tend to click generally. And I've found that at first it doesn't quite make sense and you're trying to get your head around the whole branching thing. And I have got some links for more information about that, but you will get used to it. And eventually all the pieces will just click together. So it can be a little bit weird to understand at first, but it eventually comes together. So that's the typical workflow. So the next thing I kind of just wanted to talk about was the extensions. So the other massive part of, yes, we have a question. Michael?
Oh yeah, sorry. I just quickly wanted to make a quick mention.
Yeah.
I know with regards to Git. So one of the things that, can you just quickly go back to VS Code for a sec?
Yeah,
So the one things I found was that with people, yeah, Mitch is right. It's essentially you're just rinsing and repeating those kinds of things. So you're going to get really, it's something that you'll pick up quite quickly. However, I did find that if you do go to the, you've got GitLens installed. So if you go
yes.
to sorry, I'm just having a massive memory blank. The sidebar, the Git sidebar.
Yeah. Source control.
Yep, source controls. You can
Yeah.
actually do a lot of the stuff in here via the GUI. So if you basically go under the source control on the right-hand side there, so if you just go to the 3 dots on the right-hand side, if you go source control.
Oh, on the right-hand side, sorry.
Oh, sorry,
yeah,
no.
Yep. I gotcha.
Yep.
Yeah.
I'll go the one, sorry, let's go one down. You can see here, you can basically do a lot of those things as well. So when changes and things like that are detected in here, you can actually just write the change in here and then click the tick box and basically, and then do a push that way. So if you're wanting to kind of, if you want to get your feet wet, but not having to remember all the commands, it's really handy. But definitely encourage you to kind of get your feet wet with the commands, because it makes it a lot easier, especially when you're trying to deal with a little bit more complex stuff as well. So
yeah, and as you've done it once or twice, like if I could show you my prod one, you just hit Control-Shift-P, and those top 4 or 5 commands are already there. You just hit down and like enter, and so you get into that groove of it. But yeah, that's a good point. There is plenty of UI. That's not something I go to that often, but yeah, it's all there. You can actually, there's probably several places actually to get to get to that.
And that's exactly right. And GitLens, if for beginners as well, is really, really, really good extension. It has tons and tons of really good features, and they've just made it even better recently by integrating it within the source control. So
yes,
it's a really good, really, really awesome.
Yeah, it's one of the picks I'm about to talk about. So okay, I'll jump. Thanks, Michael. I'll jump back to my slide. So I just want to go over basically the visual extensions I use, and then I'll go over some code-based extensions. So visual extensions as in how you literally read the code, and readability. It's a big part of when you're reading big blocks of code. So better comments, highly recommend this. Good commenting is always good practice, and better comments just makes it better. You can see in the screenshot here, it's it adds some context, so you can put a comment with an exclamation mark and make something important. You can do the to-dos, which is the thing I use heavily. Question marks, so when multiple people are working on code and you maybe have a question about something, or you don't even know something, you want to remind yourself later. It just helps to bring those to the fore, so when you're looking at the code, you can it sticks out to you. So to do, definitely recommend that. It helps to keep track of what you're doing instead of having it somewhere else that's not inside your code. So better comments, very good. The next one is, this one actually was recommended very recently, and I found it super useful when working with YAML, which, if you know anything about YAML, is very tab-based, which I was used to working with JSON. So tabbing and not being in the right tab area, massive problem. So indent roadmapper just makes that visually a lot easier. You can see it sort of colorizes each tab area, so you can see where you are. Just makes it a lot easier. Very simple idea, works really great. So recommend that. VS Code icons, also another recent one that VS Code used to have more colorful Explorer view, and it's sort of gone to and you can see all these icons on the left-hand side, no color, all gray, so very monotone design, which is fine, except when you've got a whole bunch of different things in your Explorer window, different file types, different folders. The VS Code icons just makes it a lot easier to read again. So you can see like your different types of files get little icons. So it's easy to just quickly hunt something down when you're looking at it. Again, simple extension just makes it much easier to read. Bracket pair colorizer, another one of those. If you're working with JSON or C# or PowerShell, it's so simple, but it just makes it so much easier to read the code. You can see it's got, it's matched up the coloring of these two brackets, matched up the coloring of these, just simple things. But when you're reading it, you kind of instantly get where you are in the code, so you don't just get lost sometimes. So bracket pair colorizer, bracket pair colorizer 2, technically that should say, because this is version 2 is what I recommend. And to-do tree. So I use to-dos a lot. And to-do tree literally, and I'll go back and show you in VS Code, will look through the whole repository and collate all those to-dos that you've marked as to-dos and show you. And you can click on them, it will jump you to that code. So really good when you're working on code and you're coming back to it a day later, or even like a year later, and you wanted to remember, you wanted to update this bit of code or fix this particular thing. To-do tree just makes that super easy. You can just jump to that first, check it out, okay, yeah, and just jump to that little bit of code that you might want to work on before you push it out the next time. So I actually started using a sub annotation for to do, where you've got like to do now, to do future, so you can kind of figure out whether it's something important to do or something you can do later. But it all still works with that. So coding extensions, these obviously vary depending on what code you actually use. So these are the ones I've used, and your mileage will vary. There's obviously many extensions there. Some of these are more generic and I highly recommend. Others are more specific. So we go have a look at the first couple. Michael actually mentioned this one, and it's GitLens. So GitLens, could not live without it. Amazing. Even just the most basic stuff that it does is just so useful when you're working in repositories. And I'll show you in just a moment. Actually, I'll show you right now. That's while we're going through it. I'll show you all right. So GitLens, what does it do? Lots of things, but if you notice on every line that I've clicked on, there's a little bit of subtext on the right-hand side here. So this is the blame, essentially the blame data. So who made this commit, when the commit comment is just integrated straight into the code. So when you're looking at it, you can kind of see who's worked on code or when you've worked on it or whatever. And if you mouse over it, it gives you a lot more detail. You can jump to that commit. You can, go to the GitHub page. There's just that one little feature alone is a reason to have GitLens installed, because when you're working on code and you're trying to figure out like, oh, maybe a bug or something, you can see where at what point that code entered this branch. So amazingly useful. It is ridiculously powerful, and there's a million things I could show you. It's mostly been integrated into the source control bar, but yeah, GitLens, install it. Definitely, no question. All right. GitHub pull requests. If you use GitHub, oh, we got a question. Yeah, Michael, what's up?
Sorry, that wasn't a question. That was just an applaud. Sorry.
Okay. All right. GitHub pull requests. If you're using GitHub, you probably want the GitHub pull requests extension. It just literally means you can, from the code, create a pull request. As simple as that. There's no need to even demo that. It just gives you another option in that command palette to create a pull request, enter some detail, and it will then create the pull request in GitHub. So you don't have to browse out of VS Code. Simple as that, really. PowerShell extension. Obviously, if you're working with PowerShell, get the PowerShell extension. Gives you all the debug tools. Gives you the terminal and code formatting, everything else in there. So go to PowerShell. The YAML extension, specifically the Red Hat YAML extension, really useful. I found it quite useful when I was working with Ansible. More useful than some of the dedicated Ansible extensions, weirdly. But if you're working with YAML, get the Red Hat YAML extension. And HashiCorp Terraform, I work in quite a bit in Terraform, and the HashiCorp version seems to be the best one. It allows you to, do a bit of syntax checking. You can integrate from the command palette, do inits and validations from your Terraform code. So yeah, it just helps integrate all that stuff inside VS Code, so you don't have to keep jumping out of it. So quite good. There is an Azure Terraform extension as well by Microsoft. So if you're working a lot in Terraform and in Azure, it gives you some extra functionality there. But I don't use it at this point. So that's it. There's a whole bunch of information and links here. There's getting started with VS Code. So there's video here, but there's also, a guide on the user interface. The Git terminology that I mentioned there's a whole really in-depth article on that. Link for the VS Code PS extension. I've even got my commands that I use to install all the extensions that I spoke of, and Git for Windows. So yeah, discussion time. does anyone want to talk about any of the extensions that they use, things that people like? There's just so many out there. I'm constantly finding new ones. Yeah, Michael.
Hey, mate. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Cool.